The rest of you, we're going to continue in our, actually not continue, we're going to start a new series, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, called Ekklesia Basics. And the reason we're calling it Basics is because we're going to talk about what the church believes and why we do what we do and the purposes and things like that, kind of the basics of the church here. And so what I plan to do is basically break up, like I had said, break up this material over 4 weeks. And so it normally the class would normally take a couple hours, but if we break it up in half-hour sections, we can do it. And I truly do want this to be a discussion, okay? If I say something that you don't understand or I need to go over, or if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll stop. And it might take me a second to get back to where I was. You'll have to remind me where I was. But this really isn't preaching. It's more teaching anyway. And so what we're going to do is like I said, we're going to look at 4 different things. And this is all in our membership material. The first week, which is today, we're going to look at our beginnings and our vision. We're going to talk about how Ekklesia started. Some of you have just recently started coming, and some of you have been here since day one. I understand that. But we're going to talk about that today. The second week, which is next week, we're going to talk about our purposes. What are the purposes of the church? These are the biblical purposes. Worship, evangelism, discipleship, ministry, and fellowship. We're going to talk about those and what those look like for Ekklesia. Then the third week, what we're going to talk about is our beliefs. What Ekklesia believes about God, about the Holy Spirit, about salvation, and things like that. The really essential things, the important things. And then on the last week, we're going to talk about our expectations as a church, of our members. What Ekklesia will expect its members. Things like giving and working in a ministry and talking about Jesus to people and supporting your brothers and sisters, things like that. So we're going to split those things up over 4 weeks. And then at the end, on that last week, right after service, we'll have some lunch and a membership class where we kind of review these things. And so here's what I would love to have happen is you guys commit to being here for the next 4 weeks. Because if you miss a section, we're going to have to go over that again, on the 25th. And so if you do miss a Sunday, what I would suggest is I think on Tuesday probably, you'll be able to watch the sermon online and be able to catch up if you'd like to. You can go to our website. Normally Jose uploads these sermons on Tuesday about, or Monday late night or Tuesday in the morning. And so catch up. And that's my prayer, is that you'll commit to being here with us. I'm excited because it's going to open up some doors, prayerfully, of communication. Because maybe some of you don't even really know what you believe, but at least you'll know what the church believes, okay? And it should open up some conversations. Some of you are going to believe differently, and that's okay. There's no problem in that. What we say is, I wrote this, and this is not my words, but this is like Oasis practices this too. That there's something we got to talk about, because when it comes to discussing things and people being of different beliefs and things like that, in the essential beliefs, we want there to be unity. And essential beliefs are like, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about salvation? Do you believe that God is actually, there's 3 parts of God. There's the Father, Son, and what else? The Holy Spirit. In those things, we want every member to be united in those things, in those beliefs. Then there's also kind of the non-essential beliefs. The essential beliefs, the scriptures are absolutely clear on, okay? It's cut and dry, it's very simple, maybe not simple, but it's clear. The non-essential beliefs in the Bible are those things which are probably open to some interpretation. Things, for instance, like the tribulation, okay? As you read about the tribulation, some people are pre-trib, some people are mid-trib, some people are post-trib. I say I'm no-trib because I don't know when it's going to happen, okay? And those are things, they're not essentials. The scriptures are not clear. It's actually, some of you you'll vehemently say, this is how it is, and others of you will say, well, this is how it is. And the scriptures are absolutely not clear on it. And so on those things, we want to have liberty. There needs to be an ability to have a difference of opinion on those things that the Bible leaves open a little bit. Okay? But in all things, in all of our beliefs, we want them to be rooted in love, because that's the central message of the Scriptures. That's the central message of the Bible, that if Brittany's pre-trib and I'm mid-trib and we're here arguing over these things and we start getting on each other and now I'm hating her and I'm gossiping about her, listen, that's horrible. That's not what the church is about. And so in all things, there's got to be love. And so I want that to be really clear as we work through some of this stuff and as we discuss these things, because some of you are going to have a different opinion, and that's okay as long as we deal with each other in love. And so what I wanted to do is talk this morning about our beginnings. And some of you, honestly, some of the core team is here. You were here from the very, very beginning. I want to share with you just kind of how this came about, how the church kind of started. I'll go back probably not to when I was born, but anyway, in May of 2003, I went on staff at West Yuma Southern Baptist Church, which is now Oasis Church, as a youth pastor, and I served there as a youth pastor for, I don't know, like 5 years or so, maybe. And then as the church was transitioning, we had a pastor leave, and then we had a temporary or an interim pastor come in, and he left, and then Pastor Bob took over. When Pastor Bob took over the senior pastor at Oasis Church, I moved from being the youth pastor to being the associate pastor. And then my job was no longer to work specifically with the students, but to work with the adults and help Bob oversee the general health of the church. Some of my responsibilities were to help him preach, which I began doing more and more and more as I got better at it, or whatever, or as I had opportunity. And then some of those things, people said, "What was your job at Oasis?" So they used to always ask me, "What do you do?" And I say, "I do whatever Bob doesn't want to do." That was my constant answer to them. And really, there's some truth to that, but also things that he just couldn't do, being the senior pastor, didn't have time for. I did most of the community service stuff, most of the ministry projects and the events and things like that. I also oversaw the family ministry, children's ministry, and youth ministry there. I didn't do those things, but I oversaw them. But the reason I go there is because as Bob and I begin to plan these events and go out into the community and do these outreach events and things like the big Christmas bash and the parties in the parks, those were things that were kind of my responsibility and my baby. And as I began to do those things, I began to feel a bigger draw towards a church that kind of was doing that like 24/7, not just on weekends, not just on a certain weekend a year, but was constantly doing things in the community that were not just calling people to the church, but we were actually going out and being the church on multiple levels all the time. And so as those things started kind of gaining momentum in my brain, and Bob and I beginning to dream about what would a non-church church look like? How could we do some of these things outside the environment of Oasis? And so Bob and I began dreaming and planning, and we did this for years, talking about it and praying about, God, what do you have for us that's gonna be different? Not an Oasis thing and not a normal church thing. What do you have for us? And so on that part of it, the community service part, my heart was being pulled to do something different and new. And then also on the mission side of it, I began to have a real heart to bring the Hispanic congregation and the Anglo congregation together, because at Oasis, we really had two churches. You have the Spanish-speaking church and the English-speaking church, and they really kind of did separate things for many years, just kind of waved as they went through the parking lot, and that was about it. And so I began to try to draw the two congregations together through missions specifically and through these events. And mission trips, we would get together, we'd go to the DR, go to Mexico, things like that. And I began to see and feel this pulling towards, instead of just doing these things together at events, or if you remember, for some of you that came from Oasis a few years ago, we did Easter service together at Crane Junior High. And it was at that point that I realized that I don't want to just do this once a year. I want to do this all the time. I want to bring both congregations together all the time instead of just have two separate churches meeting under one roof. I wanted a place where I could invite my Hispanic friends and we could come to church together instead of just send him in the evening and me come on the morning. And so there was these thoughts of beginning something new, and Bob and I talked about it. How do we do this? Like, how do you bring these two congregations who are really separate, who get together, every once in a while? How do you do it? We couldn't figure out the how, and I began to think and pray and things like that. And then what happened is we began to do some stuff. And while God was talking to me and Bob about starting something new and different, And while my heart was being drawn more and more towards bringing the Hispanic and Anglo congregations together, God solidified kind of that calling while Lori and I were at a Catalyst conference. And Catalyst is just a leadership conference. It was over in Los Angeles. And it was at that point that Lori and I truly felt the call to start a new church. And what happened is we were there at this conference, and the very first session was put on by Andy Stanley. And Andy Stanley's a preacher, and he talked about your calling. And it was at that conference that I was absolutely sure, and I looked at Lori after that session. We went and we ate some lunch there, and we looked at each other and we said, it's time. God has figured out these things. And so what I've done today is I'm going to show you a clip of that session that Andy Stanley did. We have it on DVD. It's about 7 minutes, okay? So it's a little bit longer than a normal sermon video. But I want you to see what we saw and hear what we hear, because this is not just something that I want you to know about my past, but what he says in this video is extremely important. It's important for you, okay? Because I want to set it up that way, and then we'll talk about it in a second. So let's play this video, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Goal setter, God bless you. But when you tell your story of what you accomplished and the things that God used to make you a leader, there will be far more about this than goal setting. And in fact, let me tell you something about leaders, and then we'll keep going. Leaders, and this is why you're here, and this is who you are. Leaders are not necessarily the first to see an opportunity, but leaders are the ones that are first to seize an opportunity. And I'm not just trying to be, a rhetorician. It's absolutely true. The leaders are not often the first person to see an opportunity, but leaders are the ones that see an opportunity. And here, this is cool. This is maybe worth your first session. Leaders are the ones that don't get hung up on how before they commit to what. In fact, the reason that some of your dreams die young in your church and your student ministry and the transition you're trying to do, it's been so hard for you, is because every time you throw out a what, somebody throws out a how. And every time they throw out a how and you don't know the answer to how, all of a sudden the question is about how, and you're going, wait a minute. Can we just talk about what? And leaders are those unique creatures that are able to disenfranchise the what from the how, to disentangle the what from the how, and get so focused on the what, they realize, you know what? If we'll commit to the what, I think we can figure out how. And when you tell your story of leadership, and when you look at what God does in your life to make you a leader, it's going to be a story about unexpected opportunities that you were willing to step into before you knew how. In fact, for some of you right now, that is the issue that's going on in your organization or your department or your nonprofit or your church, is that you have a feeling you know what needs to be done, but because you don't know how, you're allowing all the how Nazis to steal your dream, okay? I just made that up. I don't know if that's a good use of terms or not. Unavoidable adversity. Here's the deal. Leaders do not face unique adversity, but leaders have a unique approach and a unique response to adversity that allows it to be the very thing that God uses in their life. And let's face it, none of us like this, but it's true. You do not learn much in the wrinkle-free days. You don't. I used to, my two sons played kind of year-round baseball all the way through high school, and I would tell them all the time, you don't learn anything when you win a game. You go to Dairy Queen when you win a game. I mean, you don't learn anything, right? When you win a game, you don't learn anything. But they both pitched on those bad days where, every pitcher has bad days. It doesn't matter what they do or what they throw. They're just people are hitting the ball. And we'd walk home and, I'm carrying their bag and they're so sad. And my middle child, Garrett, he'd want to quit. Dad, I'll never pitch again. I quit. I pit him. And he quit 100 times and I'd have to let him quit for a few days. And then I would say to them, I said, look, guys, you don't ever learn anything when you win. This is the time to learn. In fact, one day I had a terrible parent moment. I'm walking with Andrew, my oldest, and it was just a bad game. We're walking back, and I'm making that point. Andrew, we learn the most, when we lose. We don't learn anything when we win. And just think, you learned more than anybody on your team today. I actually said that to my 12-year-old son. Okay, anyway. So kids are resilient. We have a good relationship today. Anyway. So when you tell your story, and if you want to know what God's going to use to make you, unexpected opportunity, unavoidable adversity, and then this part, and this could have gone, the order isn't important. In fact, The order is so unimportant. These things are going to be interchangeable throughout your lives. In fact, if you were to stand up and tell your story, you would tell a story about these three things interchangeable. But by unquestionable calling, I mean that thing in you, and it can be a spiritual thing, it can be a secular thing, it doesn't matter. It's that thing in you that you just can't seem to get away from. There's a burden that burdens you. There's a problem that you find yourself mentally trying to figure out, how do we solve this? There's an injustice in the world. There's a need in the world. There's a church that's yet to be planted. There's an organization that needs to be started. There's somebody that needs to be fed. There's something that needs to be done. And you just can't seem to get away from it. And it becomes this sense of, it almost feels like a moral imperative. If I don't do something about this, I've sinned. If I don't do something about this, I'm falling short. It's this unquestionable calling on your life. And that is one of the things that God will use and has used and will continue to use to make you as a leader. It will bug you until you do something about it. And if you refuse to do something about it, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what God might have done if you had been willing to step into that gap. Now, all of this, here's what this means. It means that your current response, and this is huge, ready? Your current response, because when you see these three big words, adversity and opportunity and calling, if you're 25 years old, you're thinking, someday, I'm going to bump into that opportunity, that adversity. You're 35 years old, you're going, I'm still waiting for that big opportunity. You're 45 years old going, where's that opportunity, And then, okay, but here's what I don't want you to miss. This is so important, all right? Your current response. Current means current. Current means now. Your current response is a terrible sentence, but it's true. Your current response to opportunity, adversity, and calling is making you currently. Okay? In other words, right now, student pastors, you're in that church. I know you. You're the student pastor, and you're thinking, if they. And you're thinking, one day I'll be a they, and one day, no, listen, look at me. Your current response to opportunity, adversity, and calling is making you right now. We are all on the potter's wheel. We are all in the oven. We are all being made. And what's making you are the things that are outside your control, combined with your response to the things that are outside your control. Your current, right now, in this moment, in your current job, in your current organization, or even in your joblessness, your current response to opportunity, adversity, and calling is making you currently. So the question is, how are you responding? Are you embracing that unique opportunity? Or are you making the horrible mistake of going, that's not a big enough opportunity for me to step into? Are you leveraging the adversity, or are you going to run away? Are you abandoning that calling because I don't know how? Are you willing to step up and embrace a what? And trust God to lead you to a how? That's how leaders are made. You don't have to believe me. You can forget everything I've said so far, but I want to promise you, when you are older and you are looking back on the things that God used to make you a leader, it will be about unexpected opportunity. It will be about adversity you've never chosen, and it will be about that thing that bugged you until you did something about it, or you decided once and for all, I'm walking away from that. That's too big for me to tackle.
All right, so for me, as I sat in that conference, we had been struggling with the how for a lot of years. A couple years, Lori and I and Bob and several of the leaders are struggling with, how do we do this? How do we make it happen? And it was what was holding me back. And I was comfortable at Oasis. A lot of people said, why did you leave? You had it so easy and it was so good. And I would much rather be there. Okay? It would be so much easier. It would be so much more comfortable for me. But I couldn't deal with that nagging thing in the back of my brain anymore of God calling me to something without me knowing how to do it. And so it was at that conference when I heard Andy Stanley, Lori and I went and we sat down after this session, and I looked at her and I said, it's time. It's time. And she agreed. She shook her head and she said, I know. It's time. And I said, I don't know how we're going to do it. I have no idea, but I'm willing to step out. We know what the what is. We're supposed to plant a multi-ethnic church, try to bring both Hispanics and Anglos together. Do I know how to do it? I have no clue. But we said, okay, God, we're ready. We're willing to step out and follow you and trust that you're going to show us the how. And so with that dream and our calling, I went into Pastor Bob's office and I said, hey, it's time. It's time for us to go, and this is what I feel God calling me to do. And they graciously blessed us and took care of us and sent us off. And it was my understanding of what Andy Stanley said there that I want you to think about for yourself today, though. Not just my own calling to plant this church, but there's probably, we've talked about this. I was just talking with Sally about those lions. Remember we talked about the Benaniah and the lion in a pit on a snowy day. There's these things out there that God is calling you toward that are big and they're hairy and they're scary and you don't know how to do them. You don't know how to tackle them. But He's calling you. He's saying, come on, come on. And if you will step out in faith, this church is a perfect example of this. If you'll step out in faith and say, God, I'm willing to follow you, He's going to be there. He's going to provide for you. He's going to take care of you. He's going to provide direction and guidance for you. And I want you to experience, as a believer in Christ, fully depending on God for something. Because so much of the time, we don't depend on God for much. There's sometimes when you're really sick, really hurt, really lonely, you depend on God to get you through it, but the rest of our life, we spend fixing things ourselves, depending on our own abilities. Now, I just want to encourage you to figure out what is God calling you to do and then follow Him there, even if you don't know the how. Because the what is what He's going to call you. Remember Abraham, what does he say to Abraham? Go to a place I'm going to show you. Abraham, what's he do? He starts going, right? Moses, go to Pharaoh, I'll tell you what to say. Moses goes. Like, God doesn't always give us all the details, but when we show up, when we do what we're supposed to do, God is faithful. He's going to take care of you. So our step of faith for Lori and I was to come and start something new. And so my first stop was to that guy right there, Martine. And I went and I talked to Martine and I said, hey man, I've talked to Pastor Bob. I want to start a multi-ethnic church where we bring the Hispanic congregation and Anglo congregation together. And I said, and I don't want to do it without you, is what I told Martine. And after 6 months or so, Martine said, I'm in. And he prayed about it and he's here. And then I didn't go to anyone else. I didn't go and recruit people or anything like that. People started coming to me after we announced it at Oasis. Some of the Solorzanos came to me and asked, we'd like to be a part of something like that. Jason and Kylie said they'd like to be a part of it. My mom said she wanted to be a part of it. We called Jose to come and lead us from Tucson. And so that was the core team. And we began to pray and plan and figure out the how. Okay, we knew what the what was, but none of us had planted a church. None of us had any kind of experience doing anything like that. And so we started praying, God, how do we do this? And the core team started getting together, meeting regularly, and then God started opening up these doors. He started opening up doors everywhere. We needed a place to meet. And so God somehow, I think through Jason, introduced me to Wayne Rooks, Brother Wayne Rooks, up at Homewood Suites. And he gave us a place to meet, okay? I want to remind you again, this Thursday night, okay? I have a slide here. This Thursday night, please be there. Please be at Homewood. We're going to celebrate our first anniversary there, and we would love to have you there. Start at 6:30, okay? But Wayne gave us a place to meet, free of charge. We had no money or anything, and he gave us a place to start. And we quickly grew out of that. And so the conversation was, how do we provide a children's ministry? We couldn't do that. I started talking to Dale Ponder here in the Crane District about what our vision was to start a church to bring both Hispanics and Anglos together and under one roof. And he said, well, what about Rancho Viejo? Let's go over there. And he and I drove, and we walked into this building, and I said, I'm sold, right? And God opened up these opportunities. We walked across the way here, and he said, we've got some classrooms that you might be interested in. And he took me over there, and they were literally stacked to the roof with stuff. And they had to be all remodeled and everything. And he said, if you take care of this stuff, you can use these rooms, free of charge. And we're like, what? Right? God opens up these doors, and it's unheard of to have a district give a church some rooms like this. And so you can see some of the stuff. And then just by chance, this mission team from Colorado was coming into Yuma and had a paint sprayer and wanted to do some painting. And we had rooms that needed painting. And God just had his hand all over this scenario. When we stepped out in faith and said, I don't know how we're going to do this, God, God began opening up doors and meeting people that could provide needs and do these things. And God's hand has been all over it. We started here. Our first service in this building was April 8th, I think. It was the week before Easter. And then some of you came for Easter services, and you've been here ever since. And so it's been pretty awesome, honestly, to see what God has done over this past year. But it took someone, me specifically in this case, stepping out in faith and saying, God, I'm willing to follow your call. I'm willing. And that's all I did. Okay? I didn't do a lot. I simply stepped out and said, God, I'm willing to follow you. And God has provided all the other stuff. Okay? It's taken some work. We had to do concrete stuff and, we had to do some work. But God has provided all of those things for us. What is it in your life that he's calling you to do, calling you to step out in faith in, that you're not doing, that you've just been, I don't know how. Yeah, that's the point. He's going to provide the how. He's going to provide the guidance. So, just so you know, the sound equipment, just another God thing, the sound equipment that we have here, most of it has been donated from Mark Brooks at Yuma Lumber. He's got all of this sound stuff that we didn't have to pay thousands of dollars for. Just a blessing. God has blessed us tremendously over this year through people, through the North American Mission Board. They sponsor me. They support me financially. The local association of Southern Baptist churches supports us. Oasis Church supports us financially. They give me an office. They give us office supplies. Listen, we have a lot of people supporting us. We could not do what we do now without the support, prayers, financial, office space, all of those things. We couldn't do those things without them. And so we're indebted to those people because they're willing to step out and support us. We are where we're at right now. And so I probably left some things out, but I wanted to just give you an opportunity. Were there any questions about our beginnings, how we came about? And I'm going to be honest with you. Everyone says, well, what was the beef between you and Bob? There was absolutely no beef. Everyone assumes when a pastor leaves and starts a new church that there's some kind of beef. There was zero beef. This was God calling me to do something different. Bob and I had been planning about what it was going to be for many years, and we did it. It was just a step of faith. Are there any questions about our beginnings? I'm totally willing to answer them if there are any. No. Okay, well, let's talk about our vision because I don't even know how much time we have. I don't have a watch today, so that means I can preach for as long as I want. Let's talk about the vision of Oasis. Our vision statement, and our vision is a little bit different than other churches because it has a multi-ethnic dynamic. This is our vision statement. It says, Ekklesia Yuma is a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, socioeconomically diverse church that is called out to love God, love others, and serve the world. Now let's start with the name Ekklesia because a lot of people, maybe if you've had a hat on or a shirt on, you might have had someone say, what is that? Okay, and that's the whole point of why we've named Ekklesia because I wanted that question, what is that? And I get opportunities to share all the time. Ekklesia is a Greek word. You can see this word in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, when Jesus was talking to Peter and he's saying, I'm going to build the church. Ekklesia is the Greek word for church, okay? But it was never intended to mean a building. A lot of times when we think church, we think the word church in English, at least in America, we think a building or an institution. This is never the intention of the word Ekklesia. The word Ekklesia meant a group of people. In fact, it wasn't even religious. There was not even a religious connotation to this when the word was first used. It was a group of people called out for a specific purpose. So, if I said, everyone who likes hunting, raise your hand in here. Okay, raise your hand if you like hunting. Us hunters are going to get together and we're going to go hunt. That would be an Ekklesia. A group of people called out to go hunting. Okay, it could be for political purposes. It could be for whatever. But when they started using this word in the New Testament, it specifically meant a group of people called out, okay, for the purpose of presenting the gospel, for the purpose of loving Christ, following Him, and things like that. And so this word church has really developed quite a bit since the original usage of it. And so we don't want to build an institution here at Ekklesia. We don't want to build some big building and have people come to us, come to us, come to us. We want to be an Ekklesia that is always able to move where ministry needs to happen. Instead of asking people to come to us to be ministered to, we want to go to them. And so that's part of the word, why we've called it Ekklesia. Also because we want to be multi-ethnic. I love that it's a Greek word. I also love that it sounds a lot like Iglesia, which is Spanish for church. So that's why we've called it Ekklesia. You'll see the other part of our purpose statement says this. It says that we want to be a multi-ethnic church, okay? What that comes from is, honestly, I've been in ministry here in Yuma for 12 years now and there are a lot of good churches in town. There's a lot of good Anglo churches and a lot of good Hispanic churches. There's black churches, there's Asian churches, there's all of these different churches. And this is the how part of what I couldn't figure out. I don't understand why we would go to school together, we would work together, we would go to Walmart together, that everyone that's so diverse on Sundays would go their own way in worship. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so the reason we say we want to be multi-ethnic is to bring the large predominant people groups here in Yuma together instead of separate. And you'll see this in the statistics for Crane. I got these stats from Dale. Last year, Crane School District, which is where we are down here in the valley, is 79% Hispanic. Their students are 79%, well, not like each student is not 79% Hispanic. You know, the demographics of all of the kids that are in this district, about 80% Hispanic and 15% white. You'll see there that there's other numbers there. There's 2% black, 2% American Indian, 1% Asian, and 1% biracial, if you can't read all of those little descriptors there. If this is what this district is like, though, then my thought is that's how this church ought to be. If we're 80% Hispanic and 15% Anglo in this part of town, then really this church ought to be 80%. And I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to pick 80 Hispanic people and 15 white people, the rest of you are out. That's not the point of this, but it gives us a picture of what the community is and what I want to, as a church, reflect. Because there are lots of churches that are great Anglo churches. There are a lot of churches that are great Hispanic churches. There are a lot of churches that do certain things well, but honestly, there's not a lot of great multi-ethnic churches here in town. There's only one that I know of that's doing any kind of good, okay? And so Ekklesia Yuma is called out to be that. It's called out to be a multi-ethnic church. And so what we're trying to do, honestly, is see Revelation 7:9 come to life here on earth. This is a very vivid picture, okay, of what John sees here. Verse 9 of chapter 7, Revelation says, "After I saw this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. And they were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hand. And they were shouting with a great roar, 'Salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb.'" You see, we're trying our best as Ekklesia to make this happen, to make this picture of every race and every tongue and every nation under God in one building worshiping Him, instead of all out in all separate churches worshiping with their own type of people. It just doesn't make sense. It's not biblical. And so we're trying to pursue those things. We're trying to make Revelation 7:9 happen here. And so some of these things that we're going to do at Ekklesia are going to take you outside your comfort zone a bit. Like a few weeks ago, Pastor Martin preached in Spanish, and a lot of you are like, "Really? Right? This is America. We listen to English." He's going to preach in Spanish. That's what he's going to do. We have an interpreter in the back. All of the slides are in Spanish. For those of you that are strictly English speakers, it might put you outside your comfort zone to listen to a preacher in Spanish. I'm sorry, you're going to have to get used to that, because we want to be a congregation where any person that walks through that door is going to feel at home. And there's a high chance that someone that walks through that door is going to be a Spanish speaker. And so we want to offer those things for them. We want to make them feel at home. And so there's going to be some things that take you outside your comfort zone sometimes. Maybe for some of you, this is perfect, okay? It's a perfect environment for you. We just don't want to be just multi-ethnic. We also want to be multi-generational. That means younger and older people, or more mature people. Okay, I'll say we have that here. There's a pretty good mix of age differences, and then also socioeconomically. That's kind of your social class. We want people that make a lot of money and people that make just a little bit of money. We want to have any person that walks through that door see someone that they can identify in this congregation with, okay? See someone that they say, there's someone like me. We want this to be so colorful and so wide a variety of people that you would walk in here and say, man, this is different. This is how church ought to be. It doesn't happen a lot, at least in this town, and in, honestly, not a lot of towns. But it's what we're trying to do. And so as I look at, today, honestly, I think we're doing pretty good on the multi-generational and socioeconomically. The one that we're struggling with right now today is what? The multi-ethnic, right? Because we have probably about 90% white and 10% Hispanic right now. Now, we have several of our Hispanic families that are gone, okay, today. But I would say overall, we're probably about 70-30, I would guess. And we, in my opinion, if the statistics say 70-30, we should be the opposite way. The statistics say that probably we ought to be 70% Hispanic and 30% white. But my question to you is, why is this? What is the problem? Is the problem because the preacher's white? Is the problem because you're only inviting your friends and your friends are only white? Or is it because of something else? I don't know what the problem is, okay? But it's something that we have to address this year. It's something that we have to address. And so what I want you to think about, and maybe you've not thought about this. Maybe you're just coming because you like it here or whatever. You've not thought about the multi-ethnic dimension to this church. This church is truly called to be a multi-ethnic church. And so that might mean that you begin to try to make friends with people who are not like you, okay? Who maybe are a different social class, or maybe who are a different skin color, who even speak a different language than you. This my prayer for you this year is that you would be conscious about that you would think about these things and not just when you're meeting new people, just go to the people who are just like you. Just try making friends with someone who's not like you, who's a little bit different than you, who maybe you wouldn't normally sit down with, you wouldn't normally talk to. Because we're never going to build a multi-ethnic church if we don't have those things in the forefront of our mind. I'm not trying to get down on you, but it's just the reality of our statistics, where we stand today. And so the rest of the vision statement there, I know we're probably already over. It says that we're called out to love God, love others, and serve the world. And next week, when we talk about our purposes, we're really going to get into those and how those things fall into the overall vision of the church. But I wanted to, is there any questions about where, like the vision of where we're going or what we're doing or why we do what we do? Yeah, Georgia. Yeah.
I read some statistics recently about the fact that white people are going to be in the minority in the next generation.
Sure, absolutely.
So, we better get ready for acknowledging that we have to do things multi-ethnically or we're going to be out of it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
The minority.
The world is definitely changing. The United States is definitely changing demographically, for sure. And so if a church is going to grow, if a church is going to be fruitful in the coming years, it's going to have a vision of being multi-ethnic, for sure. For sure. Any other thoughts or questions or anything like that? I really want this to be a discussion. I know some of you are probably freaking out. You would never ask a question in front of a big group like this. So hear me. Worship team, you guys can come forward. Hear me. I want you to know that I want to answer any question you have, okay? And so if you can email me or text me or whatever, if you've got a question or a concern or something like that, then send me a text or an email or something, and I will respond to you. But what I'll also do is next week, I'll read those out loud, because if you have a question, there might be other people that have that same question. And so what I'll do is I'll spend some time next week to answer those things so you can all hear my answer. I'll email you directly, but I'll also kind of do that. And so if there's something that's going on that you want answered or whatever, we'll do that. And so hopefully this discussion, and I truly do want it to be a discussion, if possible. If it's not, then okay, we'll discuss things on the 25th. I'm excited about what this is going to do, and about having some true members and things like that. Honestly, whether you're a member or not doesn't mean a whole lot here in this church. It just means that, that we're now a family officially or whatever. We're already a family, but it'd be good to have some people on the rolls. Ushers, if you're going to come forward, please do that as I pray for the offering. God, I love you and I thank you.